Welcome to the commentary booth where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play-by-play commentator Jamie Apps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of colour commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by an impact fee technician who lists their favourite movie as A Nightmare on Elm Street and favourite TV show as Golden Girls. Welcome to the show, Corrina Mabey.
Hello. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. How's everything on your side of the world?
It's cold.
Yep, total polar opposites.
Yeah. I don't want it. You can take the shit back.
You sure? You want the 30-something plus degrees?
Really weird to hear that and not think cold because y'all do Celsius or whatever. So over here, I'm just like doing calculations really quick, and I think that's like 80 something, maybe 90. But yeah, when I did math calculations last night, it was like -1 or something your degrees over here. So
Yeah, you can keep that. I don't
yeah.
want that.
Thankfully in Florida we can't get snow, so I mean that's a positive. Like
Surely it could snow.
it's flurried, and I think like the northern parts of Florida have seen like some like dusting. But as far as like building a snowman, I cannot pull an Elsa and Anna and build an Olaf.
Fair enough.
I could build like a Sandman though. That'd be fine.
Yeah. So we're back this week for the second part of our new little project with the Last of Us on HBO. Second episode reviewing episode 2 of the show, which is entitled Infected. So before we dive into this, do you want to just sort of talk about your connection to The Last of Us prior to the show beginning?
So I crap at first person games. So I can't get past the tutorial. So I'm looking at this from just this perspective of a new show, and I know some of the backstory of it from friends and things like that that are obsessed with it, such as yourself. So I know the premise of the storyline. However, as far as even more details, like I don't know all of it. So I'm just kind of very vaguely familiar with all the characters.
Okay, so you're sort of in the middle ground where you have some sort of idea on what's to come, but you don't know like the beat for beat moments that are about to hit you and destroy your life.
Yeah, like no one will tell me all of the nitty-gritty emotional things that might or might not happen, so I'm never prepared for that one. Um, I'm excited, like I mean, the game's won so many different awards and it has such a cult following with it. Whenever someone says Last of Us, no matter where you are, people are either like, "Oh yeah, that's a great game," or "Oh yeah, I still need to play it because everyone tells me it's a great game." So I'm really happy to look at it from a perspective of never playing the games, essentially.
Okay. And since we're on episode 2, what did you think of episode 1 with that very first really big heartbreaking moment?
That was a rough watch. Like I knew about it, but I did not expect I don't think I expected them to actually put it into the shot. I think I was no pun intended there, but I feel like they might have just cut away and made it like made you like of what happened, or you know exactly what happened, and not show it in its entirety. So that kind of was a holy crap moment for me. Um, but right then and there, I knew that there was going to be like a big emotional connection between Joel and many characters at that point, just because there was so much raw emotion in him at that point.
Yep. Yeah, so I think episode 1 kicked off the series really well, and episode 2, Infected, on a surface level, I think it just continues the momentum and did a great job of, again, capturing the feeling of the game, the crazy emotions, and in this one is all about the actual terror of what is in this outside world, outside the quarantine
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying too, just for all the characters because they're not like they don't see them on a daily basis, but they know of them. But for Ellie, it's even worse because she's never been outside the wall, so she had no idea what to expect or anything like that. which is really interesting to see it portrayed on screen versus in a game, I guess.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with Ellie in terms of having her be like that feisty character who's really headstrong. She's funny, but you can also tell that she's scared. Like she's constantly asking Joel, "When was the last time you went out? You know what you're doing, right?" She's asking about,
Yeah.
"Are there these infected that have like split open heads and use echolocation like bats to get around?" And she's kind of has an idea of what's out there and is maybe in her head blowing it up to make it scarier than it is. But then when they finally do encounter some of the infected, she's like, "Oh no, this is actually really terrifying."
Yeah, it's a lot, and I think Bella does a really great job of portraying the emotion in Ellie, just from like the little like spots that I've seen in the game when people have played it around me. Her interpretation of that emotion is so spot on. And I think she's perfect for it. So watching her kind of discover things as Ellie would for the first time is just really, it's a fun watch. It's a really fun watch.
Yep. So with episode 2, Infected, this one we sort of spend a bit more time with like really only 3 characters in this episode. We're with Joel, Ellie, and Tess as they sort of spend their first day outside the walls of the quarantine zone on their
Mm-hmm.
journey to the state house in Boston, and they come across a couple of different types of infected uh, as they attempt to get to the Fireflies. And this episode was directed by Neil Druckmann, the creator of the game, so I think it has that personal touch to this one, and particularly the first encounter with the clicker that we get in this episode. I think that was one of the best portrayals of that in terms of bringing that across from the game into the TV show, because they pretty much handled that exactly how I did the first time I played it. Was like, "Oh, I'm out, run," and just keep running and running and running and get away from this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was great. I didn't realize that the game dude had directed this episode, so I think that makes a lot of sense now as to why it's almost like frame for frame parts of it are just like the game. Because this episode is pretty much where I stopped in the game because I couldn't get any further.
Yeah, that first clicker
So
encounter is very difficult in the game because you're like, I don't
yeah,
understand how to kill this thing.
yeah, I was a mess with that. So that's where I essentially stopped in the game. But everything that I played was what I was watching in this episode, which was incredible to me.
With this episode, it starts off the one time that we're not with Joel and Ellie, and that, which is something that this show can do that the game couldn't do, because in the game you're playing as Joel and then a brief part as Ellie. So the whole story
Hmm.
has to focus on their like the story and the events that happen to them in this world,
Hmm.
where this show can go off to other characters and give you a bit more background. And it starts off with this extra background by going to Jakarta, following a biologist as she's picked up by the police and army to come in and uh, look at a sample that they have of an infected person. And I think
Yeah.
this makes the show and the story feel much more like a COVID event. Like this is a global issue. This isn't
Hmm.
just a US issue. Um, and then when the biologist recommends it, we can't solve this. Your best bet is to just bomb the town
Blow it
and
up.
everyone in it. I was like, oh my god, that's a dramatic resolution to be proposed by a high level doctor and scientist who is obviously like the pinnacle of the field in Indonesia.
Yeah, like top tier. Like they went and found her and gave her no explanation as to why she was being put in this vehicle or where she was going. Just, this is you, right? Okay, good. You're gonna come with us and shut up. But yeah, her analysis of it was just, it was a really intense kind of moment, like where she realized like, oh yeah, we're fucked. And there's no way out of this, which is interesting. So I'm really glad that that was put into the show, just because it does kind of give you a different perspective as to how it might have happened, or that it's not just one central location; it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's the strongest part with this interpretation of the story, being able to give us these extra side bits. Like, even in episode one, we got to spend some time with Tess and some time with Marlene, uh, and just to sort of get a, a bigger, broader sense of what's happening in this world rather than just what is happening to Joel and Ellie.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. I like the fact that they're able to. I feel like with games, you're kind of limited as to how much you can do, especially when it's just, you're only playing as one or maybe two characters. So you have a lot more freedom with film adaptations. And I think that they did a really well job of this because there's been so many game to film adaptations that have completely bombed. Um,
Yeah, I think
so
having
I'm glad
Neil
they didn't drop the
involved
ball.
has helped a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't drop the ball with this at all.
And in this episode this is kind of the episode where Bella gets to sort of show her comedy chops a bit more as well. Like we got a little bit of it in episode one, but this one she gets to do. She drops a lot of really funny one-liners, and the moment where she wakes up where she's asleep in the sunlight, and Joel and Tess are sitting there with a gun trained on her because they're like, "You've been bitten. What the heck is going on?"
Yeah, they just don't get it. And then she like she pretends to like wig
Yes,
out.
they just look at her like, "Don't do that. Not funny." And she's like,
It was
"Okay, sorry."
it was so great, but it's such a kid thing to do because like I could see my kid doing that because she's gonna be 14 in March, so her and Ellie are almost the same age. So there's a lot of things that I see that my kid as a teenager does, that I see that Ellie does in the game, and I'm just like, oh yeah,
Yeah, it's a very
that's spot on.
accurate teenager portrayal.
Like how far can I push these people?
And that moment where we do see her sort of asleep and waking up in the sunlight, that was kind of the first bit of real brightness that we get in the series. And I think that is perhaps like to signify that maybe Ellie is like the light and hope for the future.
Yeah, that's a really good, kind of comparison there. I didn't even think about it that way, but you're right. Like the show is so dark constantly, or like dreadful, like very dreary and gray. But yeah, that's like very color heavy.
Yep. And especially when Tess sort of says the line to Joel, it doesn't matter if she's the cure or not. As long as the Fireflies believe that, we can get what we need, and we we can potentially fix a lot of issues in this universe.
Hmm. Yeah, I think for Tess, it became a matter of not just like she's cargo and we're going to trade her off for something that we need. I think she finally realized like the whole bigger picture. And you kind of see a little bit more of like a humanity side of her versus just like this rough and tumble lady who just wants to get from like one trade to the next.
Mm-hmm. And then after Ellie's awake, she does her little fake out turn moment. They then begin their journey in the daylight to get to the state building. But as they leave that little refuge that they found, when Joel opens the door, it kind of foreshadows that there's a clicker coming because the noise, like the creak of the door, sounded very similar to like the click that you get from the clickers. And I was like, oh, they're setting something up here.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's funny. I'm gonna have to rewatch that now just so I can like pick up on like little things, I think.
Yeah, I picked up on that on
Um,
the second viewing. I didn't notice it on my first one. So thanks to Binge
yeah.
for hooking us up with this so I could watch these ahead of time and watch them a couple of times before these episodes.
Yeah.
And what did you think of when they exit the building? We zoom out and we see the broader scale of Boston being really run down and kind of being reclaimed by Mother Nature really quickly.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see like how much of vegetation is taken over, and just how things, progressively got worse so quickly because it's only like a 20-year span. So you would think that it takes way longer than 20 years for that much growth to happen in such a big city like Boston.
Yeah, where it's all
Um,
concrete everywhere. Like,
yeah, everywhere. So it's like it's been amplified, and you can tell that like there's something definitely different about the environment and everything compared to what it used to be.
yeah, like nobody has been in here for 20 years, basically. So
Hmm.
Mother Nature takes over real quick when that's the case.
Yeah, when there's nothing to stop it or anything like that, it just goes on its way.
And then as they're walking along, they go across the like overpass and stuff. And this is where Ellie says, "Yes, I'm 14 years old." And she also hides the fact that when she was bitten, she was with another person, which was Riley, which is a reference to the DLC, the Left Behind DLC. And as she's hiding that fact, she also doesn't announce that Riley was kind of her girlfriend. Um, when Tess asks if she has a boyfriend, she's like, no, no one.
No. Yeah, she like quickly dodged that question.
And that's where we get her asking about the split open head infected that navigate like bats. And I thought the reaction of Joel and Tess in that moment was really important too, because it shows how dangerous these particular infected are, because they clearly look at each other like, do we tell her about these things? Because they are very scary.
Yeah, you can see their reactions to the like from like the very first one that they encountered to like this new one. It's a very different like, oh yeah, this is gonna be way more intense. Like we're definitely screwed if we don't do this right kind of moment.
Yeah, like as soon as Ellie asks them, they're kind of just wide eyed, like, uh oh. And then they hear the scream as well, like it's raw, and they're like, oh god, there is one here.
Yeah, like we're not in such great waters right now, so let's figure this out quickly.
Speaking of water, they go to the hotel, and uh, Joel starts walking into the water in the lobby, and Ellie freaks out, like, I can't swim. There's no pools in the quarantine zone. How do I swim? And Joel just looks like,
Yeah.
are you serious? And jumps off, and it's like waist height, and she's like, oh, I would have known.
Yeah, that was really funny. I kind of forgot. I think I had a couple people mention to me that Ellie couldn't swim, so I didn't register that at first when she was freaking out. I go, what the hell's wrong with her? And then like I realized it. I was like, oh yeah, never mind. She's never really been introduced to that.
Yep, yeah, that's definitely one of those Easter eggs for the game where if you've played it, you know she can't swim, and anytime there's a water obstacle like that, you would usually have to put her on like a pallet that's floating. So she
Oh,
would climb on
that
that,
makes
and then
sense.
Joel would like push it around. But they didn't do that. They didn't have that moment. I assume they might save that for later episodes, or uh, potentially a season two or something, just to have that nod in there. But yeah, for
Oh
now,
yeah.
she just kind of traipses through the water, and we get our first like jump scare moment when she
Yeah.
messing around, pretending to be checking into the lobby and the hotel, and moves the baggage cart, and the skeleton falls down. She freaks out. Joel comes running over, real protective, and he's just like, "You're a weird kid."
Yeah. I thought it was so funny too how she really like played that all out, like the whole check-in sequence. It was just really fun to watch her kind of do that because you know that like she's never really experienced something like that. So how would she really understand how that whole thing plays out in her head? But it was just really funny.
Yeah, that's definitely from her like watching movies and stuff in the quarantine zone, and yeah, just
Hmm.
that shows her like naive kid nature, where she just to be outside the quarantine zone and be able to do these silly things, but it's also like,
Yeah.
Ellie, that's dangerous. Like, shut up. Stop making noise.
Yeah, please. Yeah, don't ring the bell. Don't do this. Please stop. We want to be as quiet as humanly
Yeah,
possible.
like I understand her like pretending and role playing the conversation back and forward with the guest
Hmm.
check in, but don't ring that bell because that's going to echo so far.
So far. Yeah, especially in an empty ass building with broken walls and stuff. Like, not good news.
Yeah. And as they progress through the hotel, we get another little reference to the game in terms of how you have to traverse some of the obstacles when Joel has to boost Tess up through the fallen down obstacle rubble section, and then we get to sit with Joel and Ellie as they have a bit of a back and forth conversation, which I thought was another really important moment, because you see at first Ellie is really like harsh and has like a really big attitude, but I think that is just her coping mechanism, because like she doesn't want to let anybody get close, because everyone that she's ever gotten close with has died.
Yeah, no, it is a really good way of seeing that she has her like her guard up, and she doesn't want to bring the barrier down too quickly and get too close to anybody that quickly. I think she's just afraid of that happening again to her.
And Joel is very similar as well, which I think is in this moment is when they both realize, oh, we're kind of the same. And eventually that plays into them becoming a lot closer and understanding each other.
Yeah, I like that. It's like a slow, progressive appreciation for each other, and I think that really strengthens their bond, is just doing baby steps like that, here and there, and you can see it, like progressively from like episode one to episode two, how he's like more aware of what she's doing, and oh hey, don't do that, be careful, please, versus like in the first episode where he's just like, do I really have to do this right now?
Yeah, and then like later in this episode, there's a big moment that happens, which we'll get to. But I think it's in that moment where Joel switches and he's like, no, I need to protect this girl. And
Hmm.
then they're off to the races as we're a team, we're a duo, we've got to sort this and get this um, journey completed together. We can't do this alone.
Yeah.
And during that conversation between Joel and Ellie, we also get a little bit more info about the infected, when Ellie asks, how long have these things been around and how long do they live for? And Joel says there's some that have been around for the entire 20 years, which is like a reference to the different types of infected. We've seen the runners in episode 1. Later in this episode, we get to see the clicker, which is someone that has been infected for a bit longer and it's taken over their head a bit more. And then we also potentially get different types of infected in the future. We get the big bloaters and potentially like a major spoiler for The Last of Us Part 2, the Rat King infected, which is very, very scary.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing. Now I just want to go and like look up videos of this Rat King character.
Yeah, well, a Rat King is when a whole bunch of rats, their tails get accidentally tied together. So then they just become
Oh,
this one big ball of like rats that
oh
they
God,
eventually
no.
die because they can't move properly.
Right.
So the Rat King infected is a whole bunch of infected that have like, they've been in such tight confines together as the fungus has grown
Oh,
and
they've
expanded.
like
They
fused
fuse
together or
together into this
something.
one like big infected that has
Thing.
arms and mouths and crap everywhere. It's like, oh Jesus.
Oh God.
So
I oof, I'm intrigued. I got homework to
yeah,
do.
I don't think that'll be in this season because this season is just game 1. But if we get a season 2, which I'm fairly confident we're
Fingers
going to get because
crossed.
this has been getting rave reviews already, um, we'll probably
Yeah,
get the Rat King in season 2.
I'm stoked. I'm excited about this thing. I'm excited about like the rest of the season though, because first two episodes are such a strong start. It can only get better,
Yep.
especially with the people who are behind it.
Mm-hmm. And we also learn a bit more about the infected once they get to the top of this hotel as well, and they look out and they see like the swarm of infected in the street, and they all roll in the sun together, like kind of like sunflowers, I guess, where they all move to follow the sun, and
Hmm.
that kind of shows that these are organic in nature, and they kind of have a hive mind as well, which is terrifying to think that if you take out one, any around you are then going to come in, which Joel says, yeah, like if you step on one of these strands, you basically wake up every infected within a certain radius, and they swarm you. So that's when you have to really panic.
Yeah, and that's an incredible kind of like concept is just to think like, oh, you can't just kill one and not and get away with it. Eventually, you're gonna get caught up with other ones that are in the area.
And that's like the biggest change in terms of the Last of Us lore, where we've gone from spores to strands. But as the show sort of shows, I think that works way better because we get that hive mind mentality where they're all connected. And like we saw with COVID recently, if it was spores and it was like an airborne issue, everyone would have just been wearing masks within the first couple of months and the infections would have stopped.
Yeah,
So yeah, when it's like a physical thing where if you just touch it, then you're in trouble. So I think that it makes a
yeah.
lot more sense that they transitioned it this way. And also, I guess they didn't want to bring back the trauma of COVID lockdowns by having everyone in this show running around in masks.
Yeah, it kind of would have been like a PTSD moment for some people. I know there's a lot of people who were very angry slash disappointed that they got rid of the spores because it was such a big, massive part of the game. So it's been met with some negative impact on that. But I think it works well how they did it.
Yeah, I was initially against it because I was like, oh, that's totally changing the the concept of The Last of Us. But as
Hmm.
we've seen so far, I think it does work, and it's a change for the better, I think.
Yeah, I think it comes across a little bit better probably on film too.
Yeah, you don't have to cover Pedro, and in the game, like Ellie even runs around in a mask, even though she's immune, but she runs around in a
Hmm.
mask so that people don't question her about
Yeah.
it, which I think is cool. So yeah, better to not have to hide your two main actors' faces when they're the focal point of the show overall.
Right.
And then we get to the museum, which is where we finally encounter a clicker. But in the lead up to that, I think the silence is a crucial part of this show as well. Like it's not there's not music and score playing all the time. Like there are some moments where it's just silent. And that's probably scarier than anything in general.
Yeah, it is very different. When I was watching this, I knew that there was like very mellow toned music in the background, but then there were spots where it was just completely silent, where they're just walking and you just hear like footprints or footsteps, or you just hear their bags jingling a little bit. So it is kind of scary to like hear that and just think like that is how alone and how quiet it is out there. Is there's nothing.
Yeah, it adds to that eeriness of being in a major city and the only thing you hear are the noises that you make by moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a very surreal kind of moment. Because you can't go into a city and hear that normally. So it's such a very different kind of feeling, a very eerie feeling.
And as I mentioned, we encounter the first clicker. What did you think of the design of this clicker and how this scene played out?
Oh, it scared the shit out of me, just like it did in the game. Like, yep, that's. I was like, oh yeah, that thing's back now. No, no. And they're creepy because they just make little noises and then they can't see anything. They just hear things. So it makes it even more terrifying because it's like you could hide all you want, but if you're not quiet, you're gonna get found.
Yeah, and we see that with Joel has distracts it by smashing the glass on the fire hydrant, but then accidentally steps on that broken glass as he's trying to move away, and then that's when it comes and attacks him again. It's like, oh yeah, that's you could be perfectly safe and moving away and then accidentally bump something or step on something that you don't see and it creaks like a floorboard or something, and then you're screwed because it just swarms to the noise.
Mm-hmm. And they're super fast. That's another thing is, the moment that they hear even the slightest noise, they're right next to you essentially.
And I loved that they included the smashing of the glass to distract it, because in the game you can throw bricks and have them break in the distance, or throw glass bottles as a way to direct the clicker away from you so you can then move past it and be stealthy. So I thought that was cool. Like I said, they played this exactly how I did in the game the first time. I was like, just run and throw things and try and get it to go away so that you can then sneak up on it and stab it in the neck, which we kind of get an example of, although I'm not sure how Joel misses shooting it in the face from 2 feet away with an assault rifle.
Yeah, it was a pretty close shot, so a little bit off.
Yep. But then Tess comes in, belts it in the side of the head with a hatchet, and then they take it out. But I think that highlights too, without a crazy amount of exposition, that like when their heads do pop open like that, it's kind of like a shield type thing. Like you can't just shoot straight through that hard part on their head. You have to take them into the softer spots on the backs of their heads. So
yeah,
a cool way to show that without sitting there and explaining it for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it is really fun, and they the animation on it was fantastic. Like it was so spot on. I mean, I couldn't get over it. It's like parts of the show were like watching just cutscenes in a game, essentially. Like that's how I looked at it. Like if this was a cutscene, this is what it would be.
Yeah, the design team for this show has knocked it out of the park in terms of making it look like the games, but then bringing them forward because the game was 10 years ago as well.
And I keep forgetting that.
Yeah, the game was 10 years ago.
I keep forgetting that. Yeah, because I know that Last of Us 2 came out more recently, so in my head I'm like, oh, it's not that old. But then when I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's 10 years old. That's pretty damn old.
Yeah, the original game.
Because it was a PS3 game, right?
Yeah, the original game was 2013 on the PS3. Then when the PS4 came out, they did a HD remaster. And then when the PS5 came out, they, like within a month or two recently, remade it for PlayStation 5.
Of course they did.
Yep. And then you've got the PlayStation, I think it was a PlayStation 4, but there was also a PlayStation 5 version of Part 2.
Yes, because I have a PS4 and I have Part 2.
Have you played Part 2?
Even though I don't play it. Nope.
Well,
I put it in.
At least now, when you finish the show, you can just go straight into Part 2 and you know the story.
But we've established I don't play this. I can't play this game. I mean, I'll try. I'll give Chloe the controller. She can platinum it for me. It'll be fine.
Yes, it should be fun. And then after the encounter, we get a bit more character building moments with Tess appears very angry after this encounter, and it's a little bit like questioning why. Like, why is she so short and grumpy with Joel? And as we then come to learn that was kind of foreshadowing that she knew she was bitten, and she kind of has a desperation now to, we need to like speed everything up. We've got to get there before I turn, because where she was bitten, like on her shoulder, neck area, she doesn't have long.
Yeah.
Like it's going to take her over very soon.
Right. And I think that's like shows like her dedication to the cause that they're trying to help, is just, all right, well, this is my mission now. Before I die, I want to do something good.
And we also see that Ellie gets re-bitten in the same spot, which was a bit weird. Like they could have had it bitten in another spot, but I guess they didn't want her to have two scars of the cordyceps partly infecting her and then dying off. But
yeah,
that's when we get another little Easter egg for the game where she kind of just wraps her arm in a bandage, which is when you have to heal yourself in the game. That's exactly what you see Joel do. He just wraps his forearm in a bandage and he's fully healed again, even if he's been like shot a couple of times.
Jesus.
The fun part.
It's fine. I've got some broken ribs, but a bandage.
Yeah, the fun parts of gaming. Like you'll be running around doing the shooting parts and you'll get hit a couple of times, and then once you kill the enemies, you're like, okay, I've got to heal myself. And he just sits there and goes, nah, I'm good.
That's awesome.
And as we're on that roof, we get a couple more scenes that were taken directly from the game, when we see Ellie standing there and then Joel walks up beside her. That was a shot taken directly from the game. and
Mm.
then the camera pans around to the shot from behind them looking out over the landscape of Boston towards the state building, another shot that taken directly from the game and looked fantastic.
Yeah. I'm so glad that they did justice to these different like sequences in the game to film adaptation.
And we mentioned the music. It's in that moment where the Last of Us theme plays again. It's just so well done, thanks to having the original composer come in and do the music for the show as well.
Yeah, it's great that they had everybody on board, like ready to go for this. I feel like they knew it was going to be one of those big things that if they didn't get the original, like, backstage hands, it wasn't going to do well. It wasn't going to come out like it should.
Yeah, it would have been a terrible adaptation, I think, if they just said, okay, HBO, you have the licenses, you bring in all the people you want. Like, Craig Mazin is a massive fan of the game, so he was dedicated to making it as faithful to the game as well. They had Neil, who obviously has a massive passion for this because it's kind of his baby from the
Baby, yeah.
outset. So they've done a fantastic job so far. And then the final sequence is the State House / Firefly ambush, which is slightly different from the game because in the game you get stuck in this, like, in the crossfire of this battle and hearing the gunshots and stuff going off and you're not sure why. But here we get to the outside of the State House and everybody's missing. They're like, where is everyone? What's going on? And then Tess, because she's in this desperate mode of we just need to solve this and get this done before I turn, she storms headlong straight into the building. I'm like, that is very unsafe.
Yeah, no fucks given. Just let's
Yeah,
go.
just super reckless. Like, everybody's missing. There's blood on the steps leading up to this building. I'm just going to storm in. Like, ooh, that.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Just no guns ablazing,
Yeah,
essentially.
not ideal, but that's when we find out that she has been bitten. And in that moment, I think Joel realizes, oh boy, I just lost my partner, my best friend, and now I'm stuck. I have to protect this girl at all costs. Which losing Tess was devastating for us as viewers, but I think for Ellie as well. Like, she doesn't want to leave Tess. She's screaming at Joel like, "We can't leave her, you asshole!" And I think because as we see through those first couple of episodes, I think Ellie was building a stronger connection with Tess in like a maternal bond type deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tess.
I was gonna say she's like that because even though her and Marlene like have like their little like tiff or whatever when she's locked up in the room, you can tell like when in the first episode when Joel is like threatening her or whatever, and then Marlene's like, no, Ellie, go with them. You can tell she doesn't want to leave them because she's brought like has a small bond
Mhm.
with Marlene, and it's the same concept with Tess is like. No, I'm really like close with her now, or I'm starting to, get closer to her. I want her to come with us kind of moment.
I think that's probably because, like, yeah, she never knew her father. She really never knew her mother as well. But yeah, as a young girl, you're probably always looking for a mother figure.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you think of like that whole scene where Tess essentially sacrifices herself and gets her hero's death? That's a scene we don't get to see in a game because, like I said before, we're playing as Joel and Ellie, so we have left the building and we kind of just see the explosions and everything in the background. I was really
Yeah, you know
frustrated.
what happens, but you don't see
Yeah,
it.
I was really frustrated with Tess, like, fumbling around with the lighter. I'm like, hurry up, use the damn lighter before they get in here. But
Yeah. It was really interesting, even like when they're like assessing everything that's going on with the infected that are dead on the ground, like the graphics in that where they show like the growth coming out of the body is just so
yeah, there's
interesting,
little
and it was just
squiggly worm strands. Like, ugh.
yeah, but it was so well done, and you can really tell like, oh, even though that's dead, the fungal thing or virus thing is not dead at all, and it's still alive and kicking, looking for like the next kind of little hosty thing.
Yeah, like the fungus is still alive and it's communicating to everyone, like, uh, all the others, like, you need to come and help me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm trapped here dying.
Yeah.
And then the swarm
Um,
wakes up.
yeah, and it's just like holy shit. No, Tess's death was really it was a rough one to watch because you could tell like it almost looked like she felt like she failed because she got bit, and she knows that she can't help any further. So this is like her one last, hurrah kind of moment. But I still feel like she had that look in her eyes, like I could have done so much
Hmm.
more.
I also love the part where I guess he was quite kind of the leader of the infected. It's the first one that comes bursting through the door. And
Hmm.
it again shows that sort of hive mind mentality where it turns and looks at Tess, and instead of like it does with a human swarming her and just taking her down, it looks at her and it can
Hmm.
definitely it can sense that she has been bitten and is about to be infected before she fully
Yeah.
turns, and then it has that really icky, gross,
Oh.
infected kiss with the strands going out of its mouth into hers. I was like, oh my god, that's disgusting.
That was that reminded me of that stupid Cabinets of Curiosity episode with the lotion monster, where it's like making out with the lotion monster. I'm like, this is the same thing. Why? Like, oh,
Yeah, it was not a pleasant moment, but then she finally gets the lighter to spark and light up and drops it and takes out a whole bunch of infected with her, and which then forces Ellie to realize I have to restart my whole bond and connection now with someone else, and the only other person here is Joel. So
it's Joel.
let's
Great.
see how this
This
goes.
guy.
And I think because Joel has finally realized, yeah, she is legitimately immune, because this isn't just a scar I'm looking at anymore. Like, I've seen her be bitten and it stopped,
Yeah.
whereas Tess, it just spread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's definitely taken notice now and realizes just how vital she is to everything coming forward, I think.
Yep. Yes, sir. Again, another fantastic episode. What would you rate this one out of 5?
Oh,
Yep.
5.
I,
Both episodes have been a 5 for me so
I feel
far.
like that's going to be a pretty common theme with this show. It's going to be 5s across the board. So far, two for two on the 5 out of 5s. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Next week we get another episode. We're going away from Joel and Ellie for a little bit, and we're getting the Bill and Frank episode next week, which I think is going to be a big one in terms of changes to the story and a lot more background and lore that we've never got in the game, but is clearly something that Neil had either
Mm-hmm.
cut from the game or it was in his like written Bible of this is the world building. Whether I show it or not, all of this stuff is happening around them.
Yeah, he just wants to be able to dive into it more.
So that's going to be exciting. Look forward to that one. Thank you, everyone, for
Yes.
listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow Corrina on Instagram at Miss Corrina Renee. And you can follow me on social media at JamyUps Media and at Pario Magazine.
Thank you for having me again.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of Jamie Ups Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/Jamie Ups Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.